The Mirage of Progress, Black Women Representation and the Power Illusion. Good evening, everyone. I stand before you today profoundly moved and transformed by my recent conversation with Denise Goldring, a visionary advocate whose groundbreaking work on Black women's leadership has fundamentally reshaped how we understand representation and power in America. Denise isn't just documenting inequality, she's dismantling it brick by brick through research that exposes uncomfortable truths and advocacy that demands genuine change. Her courage to speak truth to power has created pathways for countless Black women leaders while challenging our most cherished narratives about progress in America. We love celebrating first, don't we? The first Black woman Supreme Court Justice, the first Black woman Vice President. These milestones make for powerful headlines and emotional moments that bring tears to our eyes. They signal progress, they inspire hope. They suggest that perhaps finally the arc of history is bending toward justice. But what if I told you that these celebrated milestones might be obscuring a more disturbing truth? What if our focus on these exceptional firsts has created a dangerous mirage of progress that masks persistent structural inequalities that continue to suffocate potential and steal opportunity? This is the counterintuitive revelation that emerged from my conversation with Denise. Despite record breaking gains in political representation and leadership positions, Black women remain significantly underrepresented at the highest levels of government and face persistent wage gaps, even in professional and leadership roles where they've earned every credential and paid every due. Let me be crystal clear, the progress is real, but it's not enough, not nearly enough. In 2025, we witnessed what many called a watershed moment when Angela Also Brooks of Maryland and Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware became the first two Black women to serve simultaneously in the U.S. Senate. This milestone deserves celebration, absolutely. But consider this sobering reality. It took until 2025, nearly 250 years after the founding of this nation, for this to happen, 2.5 centuries of American democracy before two Black women could serve together in our highest legislative body. Their journey to the Senate reveals the mountain Black women must climb. Both faced chronically underfunded campaigns despite stellar qualifications. Both encountered vicious stereotypes questioning their competence and temperament. Both navigated political networks designed to exclude them. Their success required extraordinary resilience, building broad coalitions, leveraging grassroots organizing, and benefiting from targeted investments in Black women's political leadership that were generations in the making. Their elections doubled Black women's Senate representation and inspired a new generation of Black women leaders nationwide. But two senators out of 100, that's 2%. Black women make up approximately 7% of the US population. The math doesn't add up. The gap is glaring. The inequality is mathematical. This pattern repeats itself across our political landscape. According to the 2025 Black Women in American Politics report, Black women now hold 401 state legislative seats, a 67% increase over the past decade. That sounds impressive until you realize it represents just 5.4% of all state legislative seats nationwide. And the obstacles don't end with winning elections. Black women in state legislatures often contend with limited access to leadership roles, underrepresentation on powerful committees, and the daily exhaustion of overcoming both racial and gender biases that question their authority and undermine their influence. Their growing presence is shifting legislative priorities and increasing visibility for issues affecting Black communities, but they remain dramatically underrepresented in proportion to their population. The rise in representation is the result of decades of grassroots organizing, targeted recruitment, and support from networks like Higher Heights and the Center for American Women in Politics. It's a testament to persistence, resilience, and strategic coalition building. But it's also a stark reminder of how much further we have to go before representation reflects reality. Now, you might be thinking, but surely education is the great equalizer. Surely Black women who obtain advanced degrees and leadership positions have broken through these barriers. This brings me to perhaps the most troubling insight from my conversation with Denise. According to a 2025 Institute for Women's Policy Research fact sheet, Black women with advanced degrees still earn significantly less than white men, even in leadership and professional positions where their qualifications are identical or superior. Let that sink in for a moment. Education, that supposed great equalizer, doesn't eliminate the wage gap. Leadership positions, those markers of professional achievement, don't guarantee equal pay. The primary obstacles remain intersectional discrimination, wage disparities, and systemic hiring and advancement biases that penalize Black women at every turn. This isn't just about numbers on a paycheck, it's about the value we assign to Black women's contributions, expertise, and leadership. It's about who gets to make decisions that affect millions of lives. It's about whose voices are heard and whose are systematically silenced. Black women have long been concentrated in lower wage jobs due to systemic barriers. But even those who break into leadership roles face unequal pay and limited upward mobility. The publication of rigorous research and advocacy has kept the issue of pay equity for Black women on the national agenda. But persistent disparities remain stubbornly entrenched. So, what do we do with this information? How do we move beyond celebrating symbolic victories to creating substantive change? First, we need to acknowledge that progress is not the same as equity. Representation is not the same as power. Having a seat at the table doesn't guarantee an equal voice in the conversation or equal influence over the decisions that matter. Second, we need to recognize that the barriers facing Black women are intersectional and structural. They cannot be overcome through individual achievement alone, no matter how exceptional. They require collective action and systemic change that transforms institutions, not just individual trajectories. Third, we need to invest in comprehensive solutions that address both representation and economic equity. This includes stronger pay equity laws with real enforcement mechanisms, better wages and benefits in sectors where Black women are concentrated, expanded access to paid leave, and affordable childcare that doesn't force impossible choices, and sustained investment in leadership pipelines that create pathways to power. But perhaps most importantly, we need to shift our fundamental understanding of what progress looks like. We need to move beyond celebrating exceptional individuals to creating equitable systems. We need to focus not just on who's in the room, but on who has the power to make decisions, allocate resources, and shape the future. The success of leaders like Elsa Brooks and Blunt Rochester demonstrates the power of sustained investment in Black women's leadership and the importance of breaking new ground at the highest levels of government. But their exceptional achievements should not distract us from the persistent barriers that most Black women continue to face every single day in workplaces and institutions across America. This is not about diminishing the significance of these milestones. It's about recognizing that they are just the beginning, not the end of the journey toward true equity. In my conversation with Denise Goldring, three key insights emerged that I want you to remember. First, progress is real, but not enough. Black women have achieved historic representation in state legislatures and Congress, but true equity remains out of reach, especially at the highest levels of government and executive leadership. Second, intersectional barriers persist with devastating consequences. Even with advanced degrees and leadership roles, Black women continue to face significant wage gaps and workplace discrimination rooted in both racism and sexism that steal opportunity and undermine potential. Third, systemic change requires collective action. Achieving equity for Black women will require not only celebrating milestones, but also dismantling structural barriers, enforcing pay equity, and investing in supportive policies and leadership pipelines. The mirage of progress is seductive. It allows us to celebrate symbolic victories without confronting the harder work of structural change. It permits us to focus on exceptional individuals rather than inequitable systems. It enables us to believe that things are getting better, even when the data tells a more complicated and troubling story. But if we truly value equity and justice, we must move beyond this mirage. We must recognize that representation without power is not enough. We must acknowledge that individual achievement does not erase systemic barriers. We must commit to the harder, longer work of creating truly equitable institutions and societies. The question is not whether Black women can succeed despite the odds. They have been doing that for generations, overcoming barriers that would stop most people in their tracks. The question is whether we as a society are willing to change the odds, whether we are willing to confront uncomfortable truths, whether we are willing to transform systems, not just celebrate symbols. I challenge you today, not just to feel moved by these truths, but to be transformed by them, to examine where you hold power and how you can share it, to look at your workplace, your community, your institutions, and ask, who makes decisions here? Whose voices matter? Who gets paid what they're worth? This isn't just about fairness for Black women. It's about creating a society where everyone's talents, perspectives, and contributions are fully valued and utilized. It's about building institutions that reflect the full diversity and complexity of our world. It's about recognizing that we all lose when systemic barriers prevent any group from fully participating and leading. The mirage of progress may be comforting, but the reality of persistent inequality demands our attention and action. Let's move beyond celebrating symbolic victories to creating substantive change. Let's commit to the harder, longer work of building truly equitable institutions and societies. Because representation matters, but power transforms. And in the end, it's not just about who's in the room, it's about who has the power to shape our collective future. The time for illusions is over. The time for transformation is now.